Awesome. Welcome everybody. Really excited to share our students here today my favorite thing about the course is just the community of people that it puts you in contact with. I always say I live in this tiny little bubble and I love my tiny little bubble because everyone in it are really special people, really motivated to do something positive in the world, really motivated to help the living ecosystems around them, their communities, their landscapes. And that's something that all of our speakers today really exemplify. I've seen them all as going through the course this last year really make strides in their life in how they're working with water professionally on their own landscape as an advocate and really becoming these shining points of light in their communities from all around the world. We have Australia, Europe, South America all represented here. So first up, we're going to have Claire share. Claire's in Australia, so thank you very much for joining us at midnight here, your time. And Claire is going to share about her work in Western Australia.
Okay, thanks. I thought I'll explain a bit of my work before doing the Water Stories course, and it will give a bit of context to what I'm doing now. So, very briefly, my work has always been about connection with nature, and very much um, with the hope of kind of restoring that sacred relationship with nature, seeing the world as a living system, um, shifting to that worldview where everything is connected. Um, so I was running things from a bit like Vision Quest retreats to the more sort of meditation, awareness training, even a little bit in organizations. But the center of my work had always been about spending lots of solo time in nature, which was a personal practice for me. And as I did that, I got this guidance, you could say, to make a long story short, that, I could really work with water as the way of what was really needed right now. But also as water kind of as the teacher of how we could come back into relationship with nature. And very much it was teaching me that water really needed to come first. That said, I didn't really have any practical skills to go along with that. So I found out about the Water Stories course and jumped in. Um, and as I was doing the course, basically this idea for what I am birthing now called the WA Water Alliance, WA being Western Australia. That is what I'm in the process of launching now. So that's what I was going to tell you about today. It's very much in the vein of water advocacy, with a little bit of demonstration projects going on as well. But I thought I would show you the webpage for it because that sort of goes through all the basics. So I'll just share the screen. Okay, so
Like you almost see it. It's kind of doing the startup. There we go. Now I see it. Can everybody else see? All right. Just need yeah, let's good. We're good to go. All right. Sounds good.
yeah, beautiful. So I'm starting it now very much in the space of it's not a formal organization. My intention with it is that it's a space that people can come together in. And at some point in time, it'll become a formal organization. But the point is to just be able to find where the energy is, meet people, talk with them. There's lots of stuff obviously going on. Water's so important. There's always going to be a lot of things happening. But with the idea is that as we form these relationships and people do come into the space, that we become a group of people, a coalition of groups, individuals, that is a united voice for water. Because I noticed here that there is no sort of peak body, so to speak, or no key advocacy group that is putting water as its primary focus. And definitely everything to do with the role of water in climate change, I think is very motivating for people. So that's a really big centerpiece of the Water Alliance now, which is definitely where putting the Water Stories course into practice through showing what's possible is a key part of what I'm doing with the Water Alliance. So I will a little bit more about the vision. So what I see it becoming is very much an advocacy and education organization. There's issues here, like hot topics here in Western Australia. We're a place of mining, so there's obviously a lot of threats to water. But very much the idea with the Alliance is that we're keeping it sort of in the positive vein. So trying to give people an opportunity to see just how much hope there is, because, we have a lot of land here. There's a lot of things that we can be doing and lots of potential that's in the land from what it was before colonization only a few hundred years ago. So I'm going to be sharing lots of people's stories, connecting, through the regions. I'm trying to very much focus on obviously what I can do feasibly right now. So it's all very much kind of in the flow, seeing what shows up at the time. We have a demonstration project in the works right now as well. So where I live is in the city, but I have friends who have property which is quite handily on the edge of the water catchment for the river that comes in through the city. So it's a great spot to be able to do some education work there. And that's where we'll have the first demonstration. We're planning for building some ponds right now. But through being able to link it back to people in the city, I'm really hoping that we can kind of get a good community movement happening so that will lend more weight to the other kinds of advocacy and general sort of raising awareness in the population that we can do. In the future, I envisage doing more things like citizen science, being able to even have a podcast where we can explore ideas like bioregionalism, which is very much where the, water should come first sort of perspective comes in. So there's lots of things in the vision. Right now it's working out what's feasible to do and go bit by bit. But it's all in the works. And being able to have these concrete projects where people can get involved and go and see it on the ground is a really, really important part of it. Because I've definitely found here, like, the idea of sponge cities and things that you can do in the city is a lot more well known because we're quite reliant on groundwater for the drinking water here. But what's possible, in the broader regions is something that is, very much just emerging. It's an emerging awareness. Maybe some farmers have heard about it, but in terms of influencing the policymakers, there's a long way to go. Won't go into it in too much depth, but the idea with the Alliance as well is that it's trying to embody what would it look like if we were running our organizations based on nature's principles. And so this fits really nicely with this water first philosophy and water being a teacher. And so I also envisage part of the education will be showing how that can be done, basically, and exploring that through conversations with people as well. In Australia, we're blessed to have the oldest living culture and cultures on Earth. So there's a lot of exploration, obviously, to do as well in how it links up with the first law that was here too. So I picture that as part of the project too. So there's not this we believe section, I think is also a really important part of the project. I'm trying to do advocacy, I suppose, a little bit differently, and really putting the principles front and center. We'll see how that goes. That's something that's important to me, and I think is a really big part of this living from the perspective of nature and water. So you're welcome to go and explore that page if you want to check it out and follow along, because it's really, the beginning of the journey. Yeah, what I picture first is that we can do obviously a lot of relationship building. I could see there being quite discrete projects like with research and mapping for what's relevant here in WA. Position papers I picture as something that could be done really quickly and briefly. We've got the demonstration project, and then obviously building the community that's directly around the Water Alliance is part of the first action. So I suppose that's probably a good overview of where this project's at. And I think doing the courses, being able to ground my quite sometimes overly conceptual mind into something that's really concrete for people, and give them something tangible. That's something that I think is a really key piece of all this puzzle. There you go. Stop sharing. That's probably a good enough overview.
Fantastic.
Awesome, Claire. Yeah, thank you, Claire. I think these kind of advocacy efforts are so often overlooked and so important. And I just love seeing them get started and build momentum. We were just talking on the professional development calls this week about how the one that started in Oregon about a year ago is already testifying in front of the government. And they're getting so much positive momentum. That one's called Plug Oregon. But so I really love seeing these things start, because that one has gone so much further, so much faster than any of us could have guessed. And I think you're going to find the same exact thing in a place where it's so very needed. So really love the way you're going about it, and really appreciate those efforts that are so often overlooked and so important, because that's really how things change long term.
Great. Thank you.
And next up, we're going to go back to Europe, in Greece, with Nicholas.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nicholas. I also used to be an electronic engineer. I'll tell you more in a bit about that. But I'm here in Crete. The field that I am managing and I'm living in is called free field, or eleftherochorafo in Greek. What I do, I call it ecosystem design, trying to design ecosystems and implement them, of course, regenerate them, ecosystems where usually humans can fit in as well, without being a disturber, but being an integral part of it, a regenerator. I see water as a need for the ecosystem to exist, for the ecosystem to thrive. And all this with I see water as a mean to an end, like the end being a microtropic ecosystem. I will explain later, if you want, in a Q&A what that means. But let's say a thriving ecosystem can also be translated as making space to life, increasing space. Modern kind of Western capitalist mental way of acting usually is doing the opposite. It's taking space away from life. Hard surfaces, asphalt, cutting, destroying to turn nature into capital. Well, my job is to do the opposite, is make more space for life to thrive. Life needs a lot of stuff, but let's keep it simple. The main ones is soil, water, and air. We'll concentrate today in water, different ways that we can use water in order to serve different needs of an ecosystem, including humans. So once you have this set up, you have to inoculate your ecosystem with life. Inoculate means putting seeds, putting spores, putting all kind of micro biome, and then give it time and let life work, and you got biodiversity. Biodiversity is basically what creates resilient ecosystems. Whether you see the human, one organism as an ecosystem, biodiversity on us, in us, is what makes us resilient. The same thing if you see it in a big, complex system. So, as I said, I used to be an electronic engineer. I used to live in Canada for many, many years. I did all my studies, my academic career, became a physics professor. I was very happy. I was very involved. I was lucky to be in Montreal. I had great teachers there, very involved in the environmental movement, very politically active. I was missing something. So what Francesco, I think, was saying before, more practical, hands-on, making the difference instead of demanding the difference. And then I came to Greece. I decided to come back to Crete, where I had grown up. I got this piece of land, which is just the average Cretan or probably Mediterranean farmland. Dry land, even citrus fruit was dying here, 1% organic matter only. Soil was exposed for more than 8 months per year. For anything to survive, you need irrigation for 8 months per year. Really, really horrible situation. You see it all over the place around us. So I got down to work. I'm going to tell you a few things about free field and how it has been transformed. And then I will try to show you a few other simple examples, simple implementations. So I just applied the basic principles, spread the water, slow it down, sink it. So I dug a hole, not as simple as it sounds, but anyway, made an overflow to this hole. I planted heavily, encouraged biodiversity, and then let nature do the rest. You see, the soil is not because it was dug. That's how the soil was around. The poorest soil you can find, 73% sand, 73% sand. No water stays there. It's iron oxide, trioxide, very poor soil, really horrible. People around are using, and in this field, they used to use a lot of artificial fertilizers, but it doesn't stay. It's sand. So I needed a lot of organic matter. I needed water. And this is what happened just almost 2 years later. You don't see any big trees around it yet, but in the back, you see some big trees because there is a creek passing by. We'll talk about it later. But already everything was luscious. The previous pictures, these ones, were actually May 2018. This one was May 2020. The difference was striking already. Here is a bit of a more complete kind of design of the water flows of the free field. You see at the top, from the left side to the right side of the image, there is about 15 meters of difference of altitude. The left is the top, the right is the bottom, where you have the creek as well. At the left, wherever you see blobs, bigger light blue blobs, this is where you got small ponds, small silt traps, little dams, infiltration basins. And the others are the water paths. There are either swales or key lines or just diversion drains, etc. So you see we're covering pretty much the whole area with one way or another. Where you see on the right side, close to the creek, there you see a darker blue blob. This one is the spring that has sprung after catching all this water. All this water is being caught in the land. It infiltrates. Of course, the water level goes up, and there is a spring that has sprung over there, which is pretty amazing. And it shows that, you can do that. It flows throughout the summer. So why would do all that? Well, in a climate that we have no rain for 6 to 8 months, the land remains covered with green vegetation throughout the year now. throughout the year in every single part of the land. Where the aquifer used to be 6 meters, very locally, we're talking about just 1 acre, 4,000 square meters. And already the aquifer, the water level is just 1.5 meters from the top, which is really amazing. Because this way you can have a lot of water demanding trees that otherwise would have to irrigate all the time. That after a few years, until they reach maturity, when they reach maturity, they have strong enough root systems to survive by themselves. Avocados, pecans, hazelnuts, papayas, guavas, citrus, they survive without irrigation. Also, this is not a mistake. We got 9.8% organic matter because when you have water, you have the right species. We're doing a mix of syntropic, mycotropic, a lot of organic matter. It went from 1 to 9.8%. It's really, you see the soil, it's full of life. And because of that, because of these conditions, now we're able to sustain more than 200 tree species from all over the world, from guavas and macadamias to cherries, and from north temperate to tropical to subtropical, from desert to wetlands. And of course, it's great to have this botanical garden, but it's even greater to be able to eat all that and, consume this amazing food from all over the world and have this great diversity. So what does it do? What else does it do? This kind of water management. You can see the neighbors. I don't know if it's clear. This one is an image from last year, end of April, from a drone. With the light blue, this is a free field. You can see all the land is green and it's covered. All the ground is covered until the end of summer for the whole year. You can see the neighbors with the yellow outlines. It's end of April last year. It's already many parts are dry between the trees. It's dry land. And we're the same climate, next to a creek, the same place, we receive the same rain. The only thing we're doing differently is we're keeping the water while they're pushing it away. So I'll try to go through quickly because we don't have much time, but to show you a few examples of simple interventions that can solve serious problems that people or the ecosystem or other kinds of living beings are facing that we have created. This is a creek. It's my neighbor's erosion when it rains. Beautiful mud river. Amazing, full of nutrients thrown to the sea. After it rains, after just a couple of hours, the river almost goes dry. It's becoming worse and worse every year. Last year, we found 2 critically endangered dragonfly species right in front of our property, which was amazing. And these are the beautiful creatures that are critically endangered, found in less than 5 spots only in Crete. They're endemic. So we decided to do something about it. We often do when we have a big job to do, whether in our land or other lands that I'll show you around, we turn into workshop because we want people to come see the work. We don't want them to see the result. We want to see how we do the work because these are simple solutions. I'm really big on simple solutions where someone can see it, learn it within a couple of hours, go back to their home, to their village, and apply it. Take some friends and do it in an afternoon. And they see the results right away. So we made a few check dams. Check dams really kept the water for much longer, much bigger area where it was a small creek. Now we spread it and there is water in a couple of places in a much larger area for much longer, much cleaner. All this erosion that you saw, now it's being kept by the check dams. So it's much cleaner, easier for the dragonflies to lay their eggs in clean water. So I'll show you very quickly, a couple of examples of projects. Here you can see probably the village on top, and if you can read the contour, You see there is a big watershed going in the middle. All the hard surfaces, roads and buildings, they send the water down the watershed. In the middle, you see a orange outline. This is my client's property. It was getting flooded and eroded, all the topsoil. Every time it would rain in this village, real river would go through it. So we decided to build right there in this key point, to build a pond, to infiltrate all this water into the aquifer instead of letting it being run off and cleaning the whole area. So this is the beautiful garden that was being flooded every year, and we turned it to a pond just from the first time it rained. And that's why I'm saying simple solutions where you can see the difference from the first downpour. Right away, you see the difference. It didn't flood. We made some overflows that goes down around some drains where we planted, and they saw the difference right away. Another example here, a slope, grazeland, very compacted, exposed, huge runoff. The owner had made at the bottom of this slope a pond to fill it up. It never got filled because there was so much runoff that he said, oh, that's a natural thing to do, drain my land to make a pond. But what we did actually was something I really love to make, terraced swales. It's a combination of small terraces on a contour with a swale. You turn, instead of a berm, you make it a terrace. It's very beautiful, actually. You can see it in the back here with rocks. And we planted it in a syntropic, mycotropic way. And already from this winter, a lot of rain. They received this rain. This winter was pretty good. There was zero runoff. All of it stayed there, which is great. Another example, because we said we can service the ecosystem. Well, humans are part of the ecosystem, making roads. Here in Crete, people are crazy about roads. They open roads wherever, without any study, without any thought. Every year, most of these roads, dirt roads, have become a channel for water, eroded, destroyed. So we went to this project. It's for fire protection, but keeping the water is the most important thing you can do for fire protection. We made it into a workshop. 35 people came. We made a bunch of these diversion French drains. Instead of eroding now the whole road, we're diverting this water into the terraces where we planted hundreds upon hundreds of non-flammable species to make a fire break. So instead of eroding, now the water is supporting life and a fire break. Another thing we're doing a lot, and people see it and click, and they do it really easily, is half moons to keep the water where it belongs. This is part of a wildfire protection pretty big project we have. And last, so I don't keep more time, this is a big part of the project. The fire brigade told us we need a big tank of water for fire brigade vehicles and helicopters to get water in case of fire. So we said, okay, let's build a pond. But they said, yes, but it has to be full, of course. It has to be full even until September. And if it was not sealed, then there was a chance that we would not. You see, it's very rocky, gravelly. So we're going to put a liner. So people were like, so what's the benefit for the ecosystem? So we thought of, instead of just having one, having a two-stage pond, a second pond. The overflow, once this main tank, which will also be planted, once this is full, it overflows to a second pond, which is not totally sealed. So all this extra water can actually benefit the aquifer. This is all rain-fed from the road above. Just a few examples of how water management can serve basically the ecosystem, whether it's humans, whether it's animals, whether it's plants, whether it's, fire brigade. It can serve us all. So we're using it to try and save the Mediterranean from desertification, because really the big issue is that people have come to consider that this landscape that you're seeing in Southern Crete here as normal. They think this is it. That's how it was always. And so we're trying to show them that with very few, very cheap, very fast interventions, we can change that into luscious ecosystems that can support themselves and humans as well. If you have any questions, well, we'll have the Q&A afterwards. There is so much to discuss. And I just want to say that my favorite part after taking this course and finishing, really, it's even if it had been the only thing I would gain out of this course, I gained a lot. But the fact that every month we meet with people, like-minded people, we meet with Zach and other amazing people who are working on this kind of projects all over the planet. And just first, it's extremely inspiring, extremely. You see things happening and you see things changing. Second, it's the best school. Like, you see real problems, real projects. This kind of advice, you give the advice as well, you exchange. Seriously, it's one of the best experiences, and I'm looking forward for this to continue and expand. And it's been an amazing ride, an amazing opportunity.
Awesome. Great presentation. And I'll say that's easily the highlight for me as well. Getting to facilitate the course is just the amazing group of people that comes together every month. And just like you're saying, it gives so much energy to know, because all of these efforts, it requires a lot of energy. You need to do a lot of work to see momentum. But when you can see, oh, this person on the other end of the world is also doing a lot of work and they're also getting a lot of momentum, it builds the energy where it's not just one person doing this in isolation, but many of us doing it all together, all around the world. And I agree. It's just so incredibly hopeful and inspiring. And you know that for every amount of energy I put in, there's 100 other people doing that same thing in their communities. And then that's spreading to all the local people living in those areas. So it's really an unanticipated highlight for me of the course, just getting to meet with these people every month and see where everything's going and just hear how much is moving forward. It's a great antidote to all the environmental despair that you see on the news and the media and all the normal kind of streams of information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful case study. Thank you, Nicholas. That was wonderful. Jonas has a another banger of a case study that I cannot wait to share.
So hi everyone, and thank you very much for this opportunity to present my projects. Please go one slide back. A few words at the beginning about myself and how water found me. I studied environmental geography and specialized in vegetation ecology, and now working for the city of Hamburg, where I'm honored to manage a conservation area of 800 hectares in northern Germany, which mainly consists of wet grasslands, wet forests, and bogs. As you can see in the picture in the aerial photograph, lots of green and a water surface, a bog. And that's where I did the projects I will present. Right now, I'm on parent time living in Portugal with my family and currently working on water projects here, but they're not finished. That's why I will focus on the projects in Germany. So my water journey really began about 4 years ago when I started this work, started to manage these wet grasslands and trying to protect and restore the species richness, which became quite difficult because even the summers in northern Germany become more and more dry with heavy droughts, and the wet grasslands and all those endangered species really suffered. And since then, I started to educate myself about water retention and water management, first with the free content of water stories mainly. And after that, after I consume all that, I took the course in order to go deeper and get all the knowledge you need. Next slide, please. And here you see a digital elevation model of the conservation area I'm working on. So the highest elevation is red, and then it goes to orange, yellow, greenish colors, and blue is the lowest parts. And roughly the water is moving from north to south in this area, just to give you an idea. And I will present 3 areas of interest. The first one you will see on the next slide. And there is, it's an area which consists mainly of wet grassland. And as I've learned in the course, digital maps like this can help to get an overview and to identify areas of potential interest for the development of water retention projects. But you always have to go into the fields in order to check out for yourself. And I marked the spots of interest with a red circle, and the blue line represents or highlights the potential dam building site. Next slide, please. So I went out there in cold, wet weather in order to make some measurements and to get a feeling for the landscape. Here I am taking spot elevation heights with a GIS rover, which measures up to an accuracy of 1 to 3 centimeters. And next slide, on the next slide, you will see the results, many measure points. But most important is the lowest point, which is 26.98 meters high at the bottom. And the terrain is slowly rising on the right and left to 28 meters and above. So, and also there's a water divide running through this area, which is has the lowest point at 27.77 meters. I also highlighted it with a red circle. So in conclusion, a dam height of 1 meter could catch up water up to 0.77 meters until the water would safely exit over the water divide. And to get an idea, next slide, please, of the geology and of the soils we are working with. We hired a contractor to dig some test slices, and I went in there. And also we expected to find some large clay layer because we knew from former projects that that there is one. And no surprise, we found one. Next slide, please. The only question was how deep it would be. And at this point, it was 1 meter 20 depth. You can see the grayish color and also the traces the shovel left. That's where it started. And I did like the finger test. It was really, really clayey, and I collected some. Did the mason jar test at home, and it was about 70% of clay, 60 to 70%. So it would be enough to build the core dam, and we could easily harvest it because it was just on site. Next slide, please. And all of that resulted in this map I created for the call of proposals from potential contractors. And during the initial project planning, I got really, really excited about building my first dam with a clay core to hold as much water as long as possible. And the orange colored areas are piles of excavated material from ponds, which have been built, I think, 10 years ago or even more. And the excavated material contains about 25% clay. And I initially planned to just put it at the sides of the dam. And for adjustability, there was supposed to be a pipe at the lowest point with an elbow to adjust the water height if needed. And here comes a key thing I have learned from the course, which was not easy. really not easy to apply, because it is about my ego. Was one day I was sitting there having a lunch break at this future project site, and then my inner voice asked me, Jonas, is this project plan actually the best for this nature conservation area? Does it serve nature? Or does it mainly serve your ego? And after a few days of thinking, I needed to admit that this project plan wouldn't provide the best service. It would have provided a good service, no question about it. To hold water is usually good. But for the nature conservation area, we have some special aims. And therefore, I decided the clay core dam wouldn't be the best option, because there also are already two small ponds close by, which would benefit from a water retention feature. But also, I asked myself, okay, what if we just take the excavated material with 25% clay, which of course would also hold some water, but not as much as higher clay contents. And I like the idea that the water would also travel underground on top of the clay layer, and then would feed the wet forests and the grasslands during summer droughts, which come further south, further downwards. So next slide, please. I was discussing that with my colleagues and also with my mentor, and finally we decided to build a dam with the excavated material and not with a clay core. And it started in July 2024. It took about 1.5 weeks to finish it. We had a really good excavator driver, really experienced, and with very wide chains. So it was quite easy for him to compact the dam with the weight of the excavator. Next slide, please. Here you can see 2 slides with before and after photos. On the left is before, on the right is afterwards. There was already kind of like a path through the forest, so we had to cut only 3 trees, which was okay for that, in my opinion. Next slide, please. And it shows the other direction. Also on the left, the situation before, and on the right, after we built the dam. It is just 1 meter high. As you can probably see, it's not that high, but as high as needed. Next slide, please. And we also put in the pipe as initially planned, with the elbow. So in case we have too much water up until June or July, when the grassland is usually mown by tractors, we could release some water to make it drivable. Next slide, please. That's an aerial photograph. You can see the finished dam on the forest edge, and also the surroundings, the small ditches which transport the water through the landscape. And I was quite happy with the result, because, next slide, please. After some winter rains, there is already some water collecting. It was not a big surprise for me. Some of my colleagues were quite worried, or they couldn't really believe that so much water would collect there. Next slide, please. Just another point of taking the photograph. So the wet forest has enough water now, and I think the whole area would benefit, because the water will slowly travel through, and even if it falls dry in summertime, I think there will be a big buffer to maybe upcoming droughts. So that was the first area of interest I wanted to present. Next slide, please. And the second area consists mainly of wet forests. I circled the area of interest, and Yeah, Zach often talked about the importance of finding the acupuncture points in the landscape where our intervention has the biggest impact. And when I studied the digital map, I came across this area, and I marked with the white arrow a structure which I would probably not have found without the digital map, because it's in the middle of this bog-like forest where you hardly can walk. But it turned out that it's an old street or an old road built on a dam, which is just like half a meter high, which is enough to hold some water. And the blue line is marking the bottleneck, where the water is exiting the area on the right. Next slide, please. And I estimated just roughly the area which we could use as a retention space is probably more than 5 hectares. Next slide, please. And there's also a lot of water exiting in January. It's like a little mountain creek. That's how much water, a lot of water just flowing out. And in summertime, usually it's becoming dry. And some old folks told us that some 30, 40 years ago, there was water flowing all year round, but not nowadays anymore. Next slide, please. And that's why, we decided to take some action at this acupuncture point, and we hired a contractor in order to implement an adjustable tipping weir, which is also supposed to act as a bridge for us humans. Next slide, please. And even though there was no surface flow at that time, or just little bits of standing water, the soil underneath was still very wet. And when the excavator dug the trench, the sides collapsed a few times, and therefore we needed to make the trench even wider. But luckily, we didn't need to go deeper, because that could have brought us some trouble maybe. But in this situation, it was all good. Next slide, please. Here you can see how they are implementing the steel plate and fixing the weir to the steel plate, and also putting the walking pads on top. Next slide, please. And that's showing the finished weir. On the left, all turned down. On the right, it's all turned up. So you can adjust it with a simple tool, very easy. And also, next slide, please. Very important for me to learn that the contractor said from his experience we need at least 30 centimeters of stones to prevent erosion from the force of falling water, also on the embankments, but also where the water is crashing down. So that was also very well done. Next slide, please. That's after everything was finished. You can see on the left side a little post sticking out. That's where we will, I think it is already exactly there. What is it? A scale to measure the height. Next slide, please. And for me, also no big surprise after the big winter rains in January. You can see the post just sticking out and lots of water collecting, and the overflow was also working as expected. So no water is exiting around the structure, but everything is flowing through as we wanted it. So that was a really success story, I would say. Next slide, please. That's the last area of interest, which is also about finding an acupuncture point, because above the structure I pointed out, or I circled, you can see it's like a river valley, so lots of retention space. And I thought, that might be a good position to build something. But the structure really caught my attention, because it looked a bit like something like a dam or an old road. Next slide, please. So I went out in the fields, and I was surprised and happy at the same time, because I found an old water retention feature, which has obviously been forgotten. You can see the dam on the left and the creek flowing through. So it really felt like if I was walking in the footsteps of another water expert, because next slide, please. It's an excellent location to build a water retention feature to hold the water, which with loads of space behind. I haven't found out yet why the dam has an opening, if it was by accident or due to a breach, or by choice. Next slide, please. But I found two spillways. Here you can see one. I think, you can maybe think where the spillway is. Yeah, exactly. It's like a small ditch. So I think a dam breach is less likely. Maybe someone has opened it because of some conservation ideas, or I don't know. I haven't found out, but when I'm back in Germany, this will be my next project to transform or to repair. Yeah, that was really nice for me to see. So all in all, next slide, please. What I've learned from the course and applied already is how to read the landscape and how to identify acupuncture points. These digital maps, which are really precise, help me a lot. Also from walking the fields, but to get an overview and in such a big area is always helpful. And of course, how to build the water features, what to expect from the clay contents. And like I pointed out in the beginning, for me, the biggest achievement was to be flexible in my decision making, and also to learn how to tune in, to sit there as we did at the sit spots, and to just wait, to just get inspiration from your surroundings, and then just decide what's best for the given landscape, and let away your ego. Really be honest with yourself to do what's best. So I'm very grateful what I've learned from the course, and it also made me very confident to approach future projects with the best possible outcome for nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonas. That was fantastic.
And I'll say for me, this is one of always where I feel that we've actually hit the mark with the course when I hear things like this. And so I really appreciate you, Jonas, sharing that story of, is this my ego deciding this, or is this actually what's best for this landscape and these people? It's so easy to learn a new technique and then want to apply it, and you had all the ingredients there. And I find it's so important to actually spend that time asking that landscape, thinking about the situation from its perspective, asking the people on that landscape and what are their goals behind this project. And so really bravo for doing that. And I love seeing how each of you guys are applying what we offer in the course in very different ways that then fit your local environment, which that's the key. As soon as we try and create recipes, we're just creating recipes for disasters. Whereas if we actually dial into the places where we are, fine tune our approach to those places, that's where we really start to become effective practitioners. So next up, we are sticking with the Portugal theme, or at least partial Portugal theme, with James.
Hey, well, I mean, I don't know how to follow those great presentations, to be honest. But um, before I start, I just want to say apologies if you hear any noise in the background. I'm currently on a workshop in a farm down in the Algarve in Portugal. I'm James. I'm usually based in and around Lisbon area. And I guess I don't have any slides to share, but I guess I'll just sort of take you down the long and meandering road of how I got here, and what I've learned from the course, and I guess most importantly for most people, certainly it was for me, what's come out of this. So I grew up in the countryside, fairly early in my life, moved to the city, out of necessity to find work, etc. And got into the corporate world. I wasn't an electrical engineer, but got into the tech space in sales. I had a great career that afforded me to travel the world, gave me a lot of leisure time to travel in my own space, and saw a lot of the environmental degradation going on. Was starting to become a bit disillusioned and unhappy with my work. Just making these big corporations that incrementally wealthier, and thought, is this really what I want to be spending my limited time on this planet doing? And so, like many people, I started that journey doing a permaculture design course. That didn't scratch the itch. I wasn't in the space of my life where I was ready to just go out and buy a big piece of land and start working on it. So then I thought, okay, what can I do from home? Did the soil microbiology side of things. And as great as it was to learn, I just kept hitting that barrier of, okay, fantastic, the theory, I'm more knowledgeable, and I've learned a bunch of really useful things that I'm still applying to my life now. But how do I make this a career? How do I get into that entry point into start working on this stuff and get out of my 9-to-5 job? And in the meantime, I was visiting a lot of climate conferences and talks and that sort of thing. Joined a nonprofit as a director of a nonprofit in Lisbon on urban reforestation. And certainly in the climate conferences, one of the things I just kept seeing, or the lack of, should I say, there's all these talks on carbon capture and soil health and etc. And the elephant in the room just wasn't being spoken about, which is water. I thought, this is mad. So it led me, not quite in a linear fashion, but learning about water stories, and I was already conversing with some of the team through Instagram and other social media platforms anyway. And, I got interested in this, but I was still skeptical. As I said, I'd spent a bunch of money. I'd done spent a lot of time going through these courses, only to find myself more knowledgeable, but no further forward in my life and my career. But thanks to Nick Steiner, he convinced me to bite the bullet and just go for it. And yeah, the content in the course is fantastic. There's so much to learn. It's structured fantastically. But I think for me, the most important things that have come out of it is firstly the community aspect. So meeting people from all different backgrounds. So not just like me, who's green as they come and early entry into this. There's people that have been doing this for years, as we've seen with some of these talks. And getting to have that support. The professional development sides, I didn't have projects at the time, but being able to just sit there and listen to real world projects. And then off the back of the course, I also went to the Italy weekend and the live workshop. Met Zach, met Pietro, and others. And I feel like that was the real light bulb moment for me. That was a real pivotal point in this, is meeting other people, putting into practice the things that I'd been learning in theory, and as other people have said, is the confidence. Really, is just giving you that confidence that you know it, but until you do it, you don't really. I don't know. It sort of solidifies that you do know what you're talking about. And seeing the effects of what you put into practice, and also seeing it's not the end of the world. If you make a mistake, chances are you can go back and fix it. I'm not building the Hoover Dam. So yeah, that gave me a huge amount of confidence. And then since then, it's kind of snowballed. I really didn't expect what's come out of the back of this in the last 5 months since finishing the course. And I'm aware I'm sounding like a massive fanboy here, but and trust me, I'm British. I don't gush about anything. But yeah, honestly, just talking to people about having done the course and having learned from Zach and the team, it's just opened up so many different avenues of conversations and people asking my advice. And I think I mentioned the nonprofit in Lisbon is focused on urban reforestation, so Miyawaki style. But actually, just last week we had a strategy meeting, and because of some of the implementation, so I noticed on one of our plots, for example, there's a bike path that runs past it. Just through mismanagement of the space by the city, part of it has collapsed. Fortunately, adjacent to the plot, and every time it rained, that area was flooding, meant that path was inaccessible to cyclists, and they had to go over to the pedestrian side, making it a bit more unsafe. And so simply just made an infiltration basin next to it to let the water off there. And then I got to experiment a bit more. Okay, well, that filled up after the first rain. Great. So I dug a trench to go down to an already existing lined pond that had never, up until that point, it was completely rain fed on whatever surface area it was, and it only sort of come up to a third to a half full at that point. Literally after the first couple of rains of doing that, the pond filled up for the first time since it had been there, which was great, fantastic. Till I realized my colleague who had dug it hadn't put in an overflow and a spillway. So one night, one restless night, listening to the storm outside, thinking something bad's gonna happen. I quickly rushed down the next couple of days and had the confidence to know what I was doing about cutting in a spillway. And it's given me this working space to just see how these things are interacting. And it's all great to see projects. It's great to see other people doing it. But when you know what you've done and then you turn around and see the effect of that, I think that's, there's no better teacher than that. And so anyway, and out of the back of this, I've now got my other colleagues, the volunteers that come down. They're all super interested in the water side of things now. And as I was saying, in a strategy meeting a couple of weeks ago, we were purely a Miyawaki style forest organization, and now there's talk about saying, okay, well, listen, maybe we should start introducing water design stuff when we talk to the councils and the landowners, and that wasn't from me. That was my colleagues who have brought that into existence. So yeah, and then there's so many anecdotes I can give you from the back of this, from the conversations. Opportunity has just arisen, and most importantly, I think as I say, I'm skeptical about how do I make this a career. Most importantly, I'm very pleased to say that I've just started working with my first paying client. So I'm in the early stage. I haven't got anything to share because this I've done the first site assessment. Storms have just put us a couple of weeks behind, so we couldn't do the excavator side of things. But still, I don't think I would have been at the stage where I would have even had the confidence to tell them to bring an excavator. Now, I've got a fairly good understanding of what I'm going to do when they turn up, what I'm looking for, a rough idea of the implementations that I want to do, and just the confidence going forward. But yeah, anyway, so a bit of a ramble there, but as I said, I'm at this workshop in a farm in the Algarve. mentioned it first days I got here to the group of people here. One of them is in the cohort for this year, and another person said, water stories, I've been thinking about signing up for that, tell me about it. So it's just amazing to see how this is just spreading, the importance of managing the water and all these sorts of things just really is just no pun intended, but percolating through into multiple areas of life. So anyway, that's pretty much it. That was my ramble. Ask me any questions you've got. I think Zach might be sharing my Instagram, LinkedIn. Save my long-suffering partner. I love talking about this stuff, but she's sick of hearing about it. So ask me any questions you've got.
Well, that was an awesome ramble. Fantastic, wonderful ramble, to say the least.
And I also love how
ahead.
I think with each of you guys, you just start doing it, and yeah, you're going to make some mistakes along the way, but you're going to figure it out. And you guys are all doing such a great job of seeing the things that other people don't see, to then make these small adjustments that then other people see the results of those small adjustments and they get excited by it, and it just keeps spreading. And then the other piece is that as you each build, and everyone here, as you build confidence in doing these things, that comes through very clearly when you talk to other people. And so if you're wishy-washy, yeah, maybe we can do, I don't know, no one's going to move forward with that kind of project. But when you can say, yeah, I've done an infiltration basin and it saved the bike path and it rehydrated the garden and it filled up the pond for the first time, that comes through very clearly in the people that you're interacting with, which then just opens up more and more opportunities. And so that's why, the course is so focused on getting actions out of the students, because from those actions come the learning, come the confidence, and everything that snowballs from there. Nicholas, do you want to add a piece before we move to?
I had to say this because you said it's wonderful to be able to see what other people cannot see. I also see it a bit of a curse, because I just walk around and my friends and family are really frustrated because everywhere I go, I see things. I'm like, what? Why did they do this? Why did they? And they're like, okay, stop seeing the faults. I'm like, but they're everywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, it starts tearing you apart when you see the simple things that could be done and yet aren't.
And the worst when you just take a flight and you see a whole continent of tilling.
Exactly.
And it's like, what have we done? What have we done?
Next up, we have Pietro, who's a wonderful guy doing all sorts of great projects. Was with us on our workshop in Italy last year after doing the course, and excited to see what you've been getting into, Pietro.
Hello, everyone. So I just put together a very informal deck just to give some context and show some stuff I've been doing. Right.
Perfect. Nice.
Yeah, so that's me. Unlike Claire, I've come from a very different background. Nature has always been around me and in me, but I was a software engineer for a long time. I'm Italian, but lived and studied in the UK, where I worked for a long time under a desk in front of a computer, and that was my face one night at 1 a.m. working still, and that's probably, I wish I could say that's when I ended it all, but that was my first year as a student, just doing an internship. And about 6-7 years later, I quit, and that was December 2023. And this is me in the fields with a very different face and a smile, and I just thought it was funny and a testament of my change and my pivotal moment. So I got to this through friends, really. I was interested in being a bit more self-sufficient and sustainable in my life. So my values were not really matching with my previous career. And I started to study, research, and I ended up meeting permaculture, the term, and then the practices and the philosophy behind. And yeah, I forgot about this. Like, that's how I felt I was going to end up in if I kept going that way. So I met this guy, Jack, was a permaculture instructor in London. And through him, I really learned about water because he just introduced me to it. And from then, I volunteered a little bit. I took a career break where I decided to travel and study. And as I was studying with water stories, I just started to go around places, studying them, reading the landscape, and play with designs. This was the first farm I was volunteering at in south of England. This was in Portugal, my first digging project, diverting some runoff from the side of a property, and it's not very clear, but it was the best picture I had. Here's some property that got completely burned by a wildfire, partly because it's surrounded by eucalyptus plantation in the south of Portugal, and I have this nice lake, but huge gully and someone built this lake, and I was really just sitting by it and breathing and observing nature. I was lucky because this practice really took me in many different places, and I was able to see how water impacts different types of land and different types of soil. This is a bit further north in Portugal still. And here's some other stuff I was doing at the farm in England. After some of my travels, I went back and just seeing the first results in collecting water was really emotional. Some rain gardens, collections. I've done a lot of other things, designed like gardens and cultivated food as well. But this was my first real pond, still with some caveats that I'm not too happy about, but that was thanks to my friend, and I got to help him build these up for an innovative development company that put some gardens to grow food and have wildlife come in as they lived next door. This is some other of my I don't want to take full credit of this. It's part of the work I've done in workshops. This is in Italy with Lorenzo Costa, and is a way of collecting water going underground, which I found really interesting and wasn't in my portfolio yet. And this is one of my current projects where I'm now analyzing, reading, and trying to design things. This is a small plot near me of a friend that is just left it for years to the wilderness, and now I'm going to try and design something there as a workshop. And after that, I ended up sort of catching the first fish or client. And this is a project in Tuscany that I'm currently designing that I've not yet implemented. I'm not sharing more because I've not really asked them if I could, but this is safe enough. And this is a bit of my journey where I taken a big swing from what I was doing before and trying to make it a movement. Really, it was nice to see Claire sharing some of their advocacy work. I've also just created some groups, like a meetup group and some other stuff to try and get people together talking about water, and maybe just run some workshops or just do some barbecues and dig there here and there with friends around my town, northern Italy. And yeah, it's motivating. It's hard at times, because although we have this great network online, it's sometimes you need someone local to keep pushing you. But it's been a beautiful journey, and I'm glad I took it. And I think I put some QR codes here if anyone wants to know more about my story in detail. My LinkedIn is a bit on the nerdy side. So yes, thanks Zach and the Water Story guys for this opportunity, and I'll see you again soon in person.
Awesome. Thank you, Petro.
Yeah, I think such a good testament of just how if you just keep doing stuff, just keep showing up, you're just going to have opportunities keep falling in your lap. And it's been really fun to see you go from, software engineer to earth mover and arborist. And it's a transition that really anyone can make if you just put in the time and the effort and keep showing up. And it's really beautiful to see. Next up, we're going to move from Europe to the Americas with Francesco down in Uruguay.
Hi, Zach. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to share my story. So my name is Francesco. I was born in Italy and have been living in Uruguay for almost 10 years now. I'm rooted here. My kids were born here, so I'm building a life here. I'm really happy. And so my journey, I think it would be interesting to tell a little bit about my journey and understand how I came here to this part of the world, and to explain why I do what I do. And so an important moment of my life, of my growth, it was 12 years ago when I found myself studying a master career in Sweden, and the master was about human ecology. It was called the human ecology. It's a multidisciplinary field which studies put focus on human environmental relationship from different fields, from the field of anthropology, from the field of economics, from the field of philosophy as well. So it was really wide approach to human environmental relationship. And those years were really powerful for me. I deepened a lot the study of environmental philosophy and deep ecology, which opened like a more spiritual part of my worldview, which until that point was pretty much, materialist, focused on, how, resources are distributed in the planet, and consumption. And that was the focus, of course, also of these studies that I was carrying out. And so there was this, really important moment of connection on understanding that, we are an expression of nature, and our relationship is pretty much determined by the way we do and we live and inhabit. So in the midst of this abstract and theoretical studies, I found this hole that something was missing, I was feeling kind of uncomfortable, in the sense that my question was, where is the practical part of changing our behavior? changing our impact on the planet. So it's from there that, I, as many people, stumbled upon, this permaculture concept, which was really life-changing for me, in the sense that I took the decision, to end my academic journey, and with a strong need of gaining practical skills, like this strong call of taking responsibility of my life first, and not just talking about, system change and, global inequalities and things that should be like talking a lot about change, but actually not doing anything. That was my impression, within the academic bubble, which I enjoyed a lot, as well, like a really important moment of growth. But, then this was 2015. So I decided, to take a step further and gain those practical skills that I was missing. So that's why I came to Uruguay. I joined the project in 2016 as a volunteer. We built a public school with it was a nerdship. Michael Reynolds came, all his crew, and there was the possibility to join. And I joined the local organization that was behind the project. So my first contact was, with construction. And since then, I started. I was coming already with, permaculture courses and some little experiences. But since I came here, I started learning all construction things related, and at the same time, and that's what I do today. I'm a builder, I do carpentry. I work a lot with water. I do plumbing. I do sewage treatment system, from the focus of, like ecological design thinking, permaculture inspired thinking. Permaculture, I mean, I intend it as a system thinking applied to human habitat, to land management, beyond, specific techniques or strategies that, that became famous with permaculture label, but, like applying this, trying to find solutions for people, for houses, for related to land management, related to water. So, that's what I do. And at the same time, my interest was always related to, like permaculture system thinking was always connected and to, how we can apply design, on a landscape. That was my entry point on this more large scale management. And I depend a lot on, like terrain analysis, like using GIS software. Like that was something that was really interesting to me. So I decided to learn by myself, how to use GIS software and understanding topography. So my my approach was until the water story course was going through this design and land planning on a big scale, through like softwares, not so much implementing this design. So part of my profession as well is as consultant, and designers, like designing human habitat, different projects, like you could say like land planning. But again, I reached the point where something was missing for me. Something was a feeling of being unease, with the work that I was doing, because I spent a lot of time, thinking, planning, not only designing on a map, just like planning a project, and then, like sometimes, or the majority of the time, those planning wasn't like implemented directly, so all these good intentions behind how to plan and design, a landscape in order to reach specific goals of clients, or like got stuck in ways that were independent of me. So yeah, in this situation is that I stumbled upon the water story course, and I have to say that it really, really pushed me and allowed me to gain the confidence that I needed in order to propose myself as able to implement those designs and those solutions. So there was this leap, this gap from the work that I was doing and the actual implementation of this. And yeah, I'm really happy and from the learnings, the ongoing learnings, because this is an ongoing process of learning, and I love the community and the relationship that we still have through the professional development session, the water story community. So really confident nowadays of proposing this, and this is what I'm witnessing actually, that when I started proposing myself as able to do something that people started to trust, so that was, and nowadays I have done a couple of consultation, with test slices, and one of these projects is going in the implementation phase, probably not the easiest project. Is the clients would like to have like a natural swimming pool. So I am studying, and we are like, going forward in the process, which is really, really good, and feel comfortable in the process, and waiting for actual implementation. But I just want to highlight how this confident things was really important, being aware of that I had the knowledge, and I had I was prepared to step into this and face, and receive the feedback, because every learning process starts, without knowing in the first place. So, I'm not much to, I would add that, with my family, we live, in a 5-hectare plot, which we had the privilege to purchase some 3 years ago, with the dream, with the plan of building up a farm, like a small scale, diverse farm, and all of the learnings that I got right now, and I'm my end are, how do you say, like picking from, I really want to implement and experiment things, and our plot of land has a huge, despite being really small, 5 hectares, a really huge water potential, and that was the reason we decided to get those piece of land, and so really looking forward to experiment on my place as well, and not only on other people's land. And thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Francesco.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think that's such an important piece that's so often overlooked. Anyone that's been part of any building trades knows the disconnect between design and implementation causes all sorts of issues. And one is always complaining about the other, because the architect will put a window where the beam needs to be for the house to actually stand up. And so to me, it's always kind of crazy when we have these land designers that can't implement because they can't really design either. And I think people pick up on that. as you're finding, Francesco, that when you can propose yourself as being able to do these things, all of a sudden the design is a lot more valuable as well, because it's designed by someone who can actually do it, who knows the details and how it's possible. That's great to hear, start building up the calluses, and you're just going to become a better and better consultant and designer through your implementation projects. And that's something that we see time and time again. So as with each speaker, I'm sharing the details of how to find people, how to contact people in the chat. For all you folks joining, if any of you guys want to join the upcoming cohort of the course, we have a special coupon code for you for the next 48 hours, I believe. It's student webinar. And if you enter that, you will get $100 off the core course. And yeah, it's open through the 31st for the live course, and then we will start, and it won't open again until next year. Sorry, go ahead, Raleigh.
Oh, no worries. It's very important that we introduce water stories. The live cohort starting soon. I mean, yeah, there's no time like now to start that journey. Like these folks, you're seeing all different backgrounds, all different ages. Like, you can have an impact. So I love him. All right. Well, there's some folks raising their hands, but I saw one. Just one question real quick. It was from Marco. Jonas, don't you experience licensing problems, species protection, farmers protesting? So it's kind of like, seems like
yeah, licensing problems I don't experience, because I'm employed by the city of Hamburg, so I'm kind of like protected under their shields, and I'm doing what I'm kind of like doing what I don't know the English word, but there's a kind of like a constitution for the nature conservation area, which species to protect, and wet grasslands are on top of the list. So if we hold water without flooding the whole grassland, it is benefiting, I would say. And species protection, I would say the projects I presented, they are all located at areas where no endangered species will get harmed by that. So I haven't faced any problems from that. And farmers are also not protesting, because all the land, all these 800 hectares belong to the city of Hamburg. But there are some departments who own it, and our nature conservation department owns a lot, but there's also the forest department owning some of it. And they are hunters, or the person who's in charge there is a passionate hunter, and he's not so happy sometimes with the things we do, because if the wet forest is flooded or has more water during the year, he can't walk through as easy as he could the past years before we built the structure. So we are mostly just arguing with him or with his colleagues. But like I said, it's a bit like a special situation. I think it might be different if I'm like a contractor, which is employed by the city. But at that position, it's like the other way around. I'm spending tax money, giving it to contractors. I'm telling them what to do. And in Portugal, where I'm now, it's like the other way around. I'm the contractor, and people come to me and tell what they want to do. So there's much more precaution I have to take here in Portugal. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Jonas. Well, I see one somebody from the water stories community wants to talk, so I'm going to unmute them and let them ask a question. Hey. Who do we have the honor of speaking to? Oh, who could this be?
Is that me?
Yeah, that's you.
Hey, Zach. How are you? Richard Vasquez, Water Stories founder. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Great.
Hey, Richard.
Nice to have you here.
My question was on the same lines with permitting, for all you from the European side and all your experiences. Anything with water rights, anything with permits, people that just don't have the water paradigm yet. Kind of like your feedback on that. And then the last thing, if you guys could share with me, is anything you do to show or prove that the things that you did have value. And what I mean by that is with science, like for instance, water infiltration. And I love the fact that you talked about the pond filling up. That shows, that's physical. You've got Zach and his ability to change water and have a gallons per minute increase by 50%, something like that. Anything on that side would be fantastic. So that's my question.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, and any of you guys have insights on kind of how you have shown kind of a scientific impact or a measurable ecological impact? I know, Jonas, your presentation, you kind of went into that a little bit, but
Yeah, I can't really give an example. I mean, we measure the heights of the water levels, and we also documenting how long is the water flowing. But we haven't done a case study yet. But yeah, it sometimes is very important to convince people with science, with data. Yeah, but that's all I can say.
May I say something?
Yes, please.
As I showed in my presentation, things I think are much easier to prove in a place where it doesn't rain for 8 months. It's extremely easy, because where before, by the end of May, your land was dry, and now by the end of August, the land is still green year after year, it's very simple to believe it, because people see it and they think you're irrigating, while the people next door who are irrigating, they have dry land. And that's a very simple thing. And it happens every single time that we're doing any kind of this feature. The change on how long the land stays green is immediate from the first year. Also, as I said before, erosion. We see the example I gave, every single year at the end of the winter, the owner, where we did these diversion drains, the owner would have to call someone with a bulldozer in order to, from the bottom of his property, where it was a public road, he would have to remove a lot of erosion from there. This year he called us and he said, it's amazing, I don't have to remove anything. The fact that the water level has risen to 1.5 meters below from the surface, that's, I mean, people, my neighbors that have been here for 40, 50, 60 years, they have dug before for different reasons, for housing, for piping. They would dig to 5, 6 meters. They would never find water during summer. Here we find water at 1.5 meters. We just dug it by hand. There is water coming out. These are very, very tangible things happening all the time. And you don't have to wait for years for these things to happen. So really, it's I know in order for something to be scientifically rigorous, you have to monitor it for a long time. But we know, I'm a scientist myself, but sometimes you don't even have to do that, because it just happens right before your eyes. Concerning the water rights, I want to say one thing. I was very afraid. Very recently, in the community, you can find, Zach has posted, actually, the European Union has posted a whole book with all the nature-based solutions called for water retention. And all of these are recommended by the European Union, the European Commission. And you don't need, for most of these things, you don't need any permit. We thought, for example, we needed a permit to dig this big 550 cubic meters pond. We went to get a permit, and they told us, oh, if it is for firefighting purposes, you do not need a permit up to 1,000 cubic meters. So now we have permission to build ponds just by saying what? Just by saying that if there is a fire brigade can come here and use this water. And then you get permit by default. Check dams. If it's up to 1.5 meters and natural materials, you don't need any permit. So there are so many things we can do. So many things we can do without permit if we know what we're doing, of course. So I encourage you to go find and read about these things, because I was very afraid too before. And now this has solved, let my hands free. And I tell, wherever I go, I tell people, you can do it. You don't have to look into more permits and stuff like that.
Awesome. Pietro, you had some input?
And just real quick, I put both of those documents into the chat here as links if anyone wants to find those.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something you shared earlier, Nicola. Soil tests. I think that's a really good scientific way of proving it. When there's life in the soil and you go from close to 0 to 10% life, organic matter in the soil, I think that's it really. That's the simplest way we can get data on it, I think, in my opinion, because water is so difficult to measure, but we can measure what's next to it. Yeah, that's it really. And the water and the fire brigade bit is a bit very easy trick to get it approved by the municipalities everywhere. That's the first trick I was told here in Italy as well.
I think another cool test would be especially on sites where it's nearby a degraded area, is like a water infiltration test, where you can test like how fast water infiltrates, and also compaction tests to see in areas where water retention bodies are built, how is the compaction being, how has that been impacted? Because that largely, those areas, if there's a lot of green, it largely has had a great impact on compaction. All right.
Sorry. Just wanted to add one last thing. I think right now, these kind of tests, even the soil test, I don't know what's the experience from you guys around Europe and the world, but for me, they can be fairly expensive to some pockets. So doing it in large scale, you need loans and grants and that kind of stuff. So until either they get cheaper or they will get, support from the authorities to do this, science will be inherently behind all this, and data will be still very expensive to get, because we can do 1 per project, 2 per project every 5-10 years, I guess. But at least that's my case. That's my input on this.
Francesco, you had some input?
Yeah, I just wanted to delve a little bit to find an answer to the question on how do we prove that what we do is valuable, And as Nicola said, of course, in dry climates, the results are pretty easy to see in a short period, in one season probably. But for example, where I live, water is not considered an issue. I mean, this place is blessed with homogeneous rainfall during the years. It tends to be like a more subtropical climate, And so, I find myself with this challenge of, stress the importance of working with water and retain water in a context where water is taken for granted. And we have probably the biggest aquifer below ground in this part of the world. And so, people are used to dug a bore well or, make some, retention for use for agriculture or whatever. But one thing that for me was really, really important to learn from the course was this water cycle framework, understanding how and why doing certain things beyond specific goals, like related to specific uses of the project, like why do retain water beyond the need of irrigation, for example, So with this, what I would like to say is would be interesting to keep working together as a network, in order to build together narratives, to bring forward, for example, in more like rainy context, as I live, how to develop like this story of this narrative with which to work not only in private project, but with institutions, and where from what I see is that where water is more an issue, it's easier to start conversation with institutions, because the issue is big, and the need for water or is super important. But in other places, like why should I put machines on my place? Why do implement strategies to retain water, to infiltrate water? So yeah, I would really love to connect and start helping each other to build together this narrative, around water cycle. And the course is full of this, but the challenge is how to apply it in different climates with different perception of the problem.
Well, I see Stenbergen would like to talk, so let's unmute. Meet them. Hello there.
Hi, everyone. It's been a very interesting conversation for the first time I've attended online, like live. And maybe, of course, in my case, I also I'm actually one of those who will be attending this year's course. But now the most interesting part that I wanted to ask about is issues to do with policies, because one of the challenges that I've noticed in my country, normally when it comes to water, we have a lot of misguided policies on how to harvest water. Because I've done so much observation on how even roads are constructed. So you find like a lot of water is wasted and it just goes to the sea. So like right now, we are during the rainy seasons, but the government is not doing anything on issues to do with maybe water harvesting. We have several places. Like in fact, there's a guy I was talking to, he's a GIS expert. He was telling me he has all the old, he has a map of all the old water points that used to be there before climate change affected. So the question would be, now, for example, if this person has all this, he has an old map that shows this used to be a water point. So are there possibilities of course, us being able to revive these places? Because the places are there. Literally, right now, when you go to those places, there's no rivers, there's no spring. But now he had documented all that information. He has a special document that actually shows each and every water point around my region. So the curiosity that I would have is, how possible is it to be in a position to actually revive these water points that literally used to exist back in the days? But right now, majority of them are dried up because of the climate change.
I would say definitely very possible. And those are, I think for you, Stenbergen, those are going to be some of your first clear acupuncture points for water on that landscape to really understand. We see situations where you can even create springs where they weren't before. And so re-enlivening something that was there in the past is oftentimes quite easy. Now, you want to look at all the different factors. There may be some factors at play that prevent that from happening, but I think those are very likely points to be able to work, to be able to recover, to be able to restore. And I think it's important to understand that we can't go back exactly the way we came. We can't get back to exactly what there was in the past, but what there was in the past can really inform what there can be in the future. And so I think that could be used as a really helpful tool to help guide your efforts where to work, and also to help inform others that this isn't some theoretical possible future. This was in existence in recent history, and that makes it a lot more tangible to recover. I think it also speaks to how in many places this is a return to traditional land management practices that were in place when those sources were around or alive. And so all of these can really help build the narrative and the story as you start to engage others in your community to do this kind of work.
Awesome. And one more thing, Stenbergen, if you haven't seen the film Reviving Rivers, that's on YouTube. That's about story Rajendra Singh and how over 3 decades him and his team revived 7 rivers by building hundreds and eventually thousands of these small water retention structures, which ended up restoring rivers that had been dry for decades. So it's a really hopeful story of how people and small groups are able to do that.
Yeah, I think one of the most fascinating things of this work for me is the context. And from learning more about that, you tend to learn more about the past and the history of it and the people living there. And when you have learned more about it, you will see they knew how to manage water, and sometimes you just have to follow that, and that's the fastest way, easiest way to do it without much knowledge. So if you have a map showing these points, take it with a pinch of salt, like make some consideration to it, but very likely it's a good way to start, because they didn't have as many way of digging, measuring, or like knowing about the earth and geology that they had to know with ancient knowledge how to do it, and they were often like right somehow. We don't know how to. They did it, but yeah,
good stuff. So here's a good question. Well, here's a quick question from the community. Where has the funding come for your projects? So I guess it's directed for any of you guys who actually built some substantial water, earthworks. Is where has the funding come? Like, how did you guys were able to do that?
Meaning for the projects that we're doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So for my case, a big part of them are private projects. But in order to start, private meaning someone who has a farm and has this issue and comes to me to solve it. And he wants to regenerate the landscape in the process. But before starting to have clients, I had to, in my case, I had to build my own. So for most people, before going to their place, I invite them over to my place and tell them, look, this is what can be done first. I think it's a very important thing. There's so many people who are skeptical, and rightly so. They've seen a lot. They heard a lot. They've seen a lot of scams. So they want to see something. And they very often, could you please send me some examples? Could you please? Because they want to see that what I'm telling them is not out of my head. So that's very important. And as I said before, I try to keep things very simple initially, start with simple steps, cheap, so that people are able to invest in that, see the first step, they say, okay, it works, let's go do the second, the third. Also, there are, in my case, some projects that are funded by foundations. They exist, and you write to them and you tell them, look, I want to protect this river. I want to do a fire protection for this village. Please, this is my budget. Give me that much money and go do it. And it's happening. Right now, the one about the fire protection I was describing to you, it's funded by a foundation, by some people who have money. It's rare, but it happens. And they want to do something positive. So we try to take advantage of that. In the future, if you're in Europe, in the European Union, there are a lot of programs for funding that can either be from the green fund. You have to have an organization to do that. And you can apply for funding for many different kinds of projects concerning water and land. And also, there are a lot of Erasmus Plus programs funded by the European Union as well, where you can get 60, 120, 300,000, depending on the length of the program. We had one like that, which was educational, but with educational, you can also implement a lot of stuff if you have 30 people for 2 weeks, or there are 1 year programs, etc. So there is a lot of opportunities. If you want, I can send maybe in the water stories for the people who are in the EU some suggestions concerning the Green Fund and Erasmus Plus at least, so you can go look into it more, because it's worth taking this money and doing something great with it. Because between us, a lot of this money is just used for redundant things. So if you want, maybe I can make a post about a couple of these.
That would be super. Yes, please. Yeah, I think it's really one of the things we touch on in the course is call the child by the right name. Whatever you have to call it, let's get some of these immense amounts of funding going to some projects that are actually going to help people, because unfortunately a lot of them are going for, new coats of green paint on things that won't actually make much of a difference.
Hey, James, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just to add another sort of a source that I'm currently now exploring a bit further. Based on so we've had a few storms roll through Lisbon or Portugal recently, and pretty heavy amounts of damage. And an area that I'm exploring, and I'll keep people updated as I go through in the community, is approaching insurance companies. So approaching them as a sense of funding these projects to mitigate the effects of their claims and things like that. So I've heard from other projects, not water-based, but other projects in terms of fire, that sort of thing, that they've from colleagues that they've had some great results speaking in those terms, and it's started to it's basically started to activate those insurance companies to say, okay, look, we're going to get ahead of the problem rather than just pay out when it happens.
And that's something where there's huge incentive. I've talked to other people about also the reinsurance agencies, which insure insurance agencies. They're the ones that have to pay out when a big fire comes through or a big flood comes through. So they have huge economic incentive to try and implement some of these solutions to lessen the chances of that happening.
Well, I see. This could be a good question to end on. It's from Adam Hicks. Adam, were you at the Vernonia workshop in Oregon? Anyways, I'm trying to remember if you were, but he's saying, could you comment on using these techniques in projects focused on Hawaii, specifically in Maui? In the past, I've been inspired by the techniques, but have struggled to see them implemented on very porous volcanic environments. I know it's possible, just curious of your high-level comments, if any. Inspired to take the course, but want to see if it can have a direct application in Maui, upcountry environment. Mahalo.
Are any of you guys familiar with Hawaii? Do you want to speak to that? Or would it be best if I do?
Yeah, Zach, you had the project which was on the Agua Unidos por Agua video, and that was on volcanic soil, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And, I'll say the biggest thing is that the course opens up a pathway and an approach. And we share all the details for the various techniques that we use, but we really try and not make it about that because it's not about making an earthen lined water body or a keyway dam. It's about reading the landscape, understanding how the landscape processes are unfolding and how to maximize the water cycling in that area. So in some projects, like in India, they are specifically looking for the most porous areas possible to get that water into the ground, to build up the aquifer, to be able to use that in the future. In a place like Hawaii, you're going to have your freshwater lens, which is going to push down the salt water and create a groundwater reservoir over time on an island. And so whether you just use that freshwater lens or use and replenish that freshwater lens makes a big difference in terms of how long it's going to last and whether that's a sustainable source of water or not. So I think absolutely water cycle restoration as a practice applies everywhere. That doesn't mean that you're creating year-round bodies of water everywhere. Quite the opposite. You need to specifically tailor it for the types of soils you have, for the type of environment you have, for all of those local context details, which is why we focus so much on, rather than teaching, here's the recipe for how to do this type of implementation, here's the process for reading and understanding your landscape, understanding your water flows, how that process is happening, and then how you can work with that process. And I think that's why it applies around the world. Any given technique has an area where it applies and an area where it doesn't. But an approach of reading the landscape, working with nature, and cycling the water, those things work and achieve good results anywhere.
Yes, the last question here from Nikos. Do you guys believe that applying water retention measures only go as far as increasing resilience to climate change, or do they actually manage to restore the climate? Good high-level question here. Well, in a lot of the stories we've highlighted, they've had a local ecological impact that is offset. Like for the Rajendra case, he's seen the offset of up to 2 degrees of warming from the amount of water retention measures and the increase in vegetation from the amount of water captured in the soil, which led to an increase in vegetation, increase in water retention, increase in basically cloud cover and lowers that local temperature. So, you're not seeing a global climate impact from that case in India, but if you do, the people at New Water Paradigm, they really stress that, yes, this is going to have a climate impact on a large enough scale. This is, with this increase in vegetation, it will be also drawing down CO2 at high levels, but you're also seeing an increase in ecological stability, an increase of rainfall, and in even cases like Alejandro Carrillo and in Mexico, he regreened his area with ranching to the point where clouds were coming back. He was able to actually see a water cycle restoration impact in the amount of cloud cover, and that's over a few million acres of ranch land, and that was a few individuals doing that. So, we are seeing an ecological impact and a local climate impact. Though I know like the CO2 impact of all of these still needs to be kind of like dived into, and case studies need to be provided for that. Zach, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, but I'd love to hear our students' opinions. Anyone who wants to stick their neck out there on it, I'll close off.
Well, I love that they asked what you believe, because then I won't be charged for any mis data or anything. So I believe working with water is gonna slow down. It's gonna give us the time to actually tackle climate change. Because with water retention, tree planting, trees manage water better than us, and we'll be able to push further down the line the date of, well, I'm going to be radical, collapse of the climate for us, at least as human species and other animal species. And it's giving us the time to work on carbon and pollution and other more tricky parts, systemic parts. This is what I believe. What you guys believe?
Yeah, I think a big thing about water cycle restoration, it's not an excuse. It's not like it's like, oh, that means we could keep pumping out hundreds of gigatons of carbon. No, it's working with the ecosystems to do its part in restoring the ecology in microclimates, in regional climates, and eventually larger statewide climates and continental-wide climates. And so it'll have an ecological impact while we also work on carbon drawdown. And it's doing carbon drawdown too. So a few more questions.
I think Nicholas was going to say something here too, and I got a little bit to add here too as well before we move on to
just very quick. I think it's a huge issue and has so many aspects, but I would like to make this note, Dominic, that climate change is not an issue in itself. Climate change, biodiversity, water, ecosystem collapse is one thing. So water retention, as I was showing in my presentation, is the pyramid. If you don't have the water, none of these other things can be improved. If you don't have the water, the biodiversity will collapse. If you don't have water, organic matter will start going down. It will be oxidized. So it is the basis. It's not by itself, but it's the basis so that we can build on that in order to solve all these other ecological issues that are, at the end of the day, one. So yeah, it increases resilience, but if we do the right steps, it also reverses not only climate change, but everything else that is connected to the climate change.
And that's, for me, kind of the big point is, if we're looking at what does restoring the climate mean, if we're looking at rebalancing local temperatures and restoring local precipitation patterns, yes, this can absolutely do that. If we're looking at the human quality of life issues that are arising from climate change, flood, drought, fire, water scarcity, food scarcity, yes, this can absolutely deal with all of those. Is it going to, I'll say from my training in the climate models and hearing about the new climate models, I don't have enough faith in them to base anything off of them. So I can't say that this is going to have any impact on terms of, what we're seeing there, what we're seeing on a global level. There's too much variability with water, and the new climate models are more broken than the old ones, which is why they haven't released them. The ones where they're actually accounting for cloud cover do a really bad job of predicting the past, and therefore they're probably not that great at predicting the future. And it's kind of this crisis going on in the climate change movement right now, that the next generation model is worse at predicting than the last generation model. And it was supposed to be way better to finally account for clouds. And so that's not at all to say like we should deny any of that and there's not issues or anything like that. But it's just to say that I think we really need to look at what are the issues people and landscapes are going to deal with. And water scarcity, biodiversity loss, flood, drought, and fire, these are the things that are going to kill people and landscapes and make life harder for people. And we can address all of those things pretty easily with all of these techniques and with working with nature. So if the world stays the same temperature, having a green, lush oasis is going to be helpful. If it's a lot hotter, having a green, lush oasis is going to be really helpful. If it's a lot colder, having a green, lush oasis is going to be really helpful. So I think these are things that help improve human and non-human organism quality of life, irrespective of exactly what's going on with CO2 and regulation of our planet's climate.
Yeah, I think you're not going to have carbon drawdown on a desertifying continent. So it just makes total sense. You re-green, you rehydrate, and that is going to have a climate impact because you're not going to have that if that's not happening. All right. I guess we have one last question. Otherwise, we could end it. I guess it could be a brief one. It's just, has any of you found any resistance to your practical work on the ground? And I feel like that's a good last question to end on. Go ahead, James.
Yes. Sorry for the noise in the background. Everyone's come back off the land now, so they're all here. Yes, I've found, so from individuals and private landowners, they get it. They see the problems. They understand the financial costs to themselves. The ones I speak about, I think it's when I'm working with public lands, with the city, they from the conversations that we've had, they're still very much stuck in the old hydrological solution of just put a concrete channel and get rid of it. And so when you start to introduce these new ideas and holding the water on the land, etc., I've had conversations about worrying about the increase in mosquitoes and diphtheria, you're going to create a landslip and a landslide on there. So yes, so it's there's a lot of education for public entities and governments that I'm finding that's the resistance areas I'm finding. I'm going to mute myself, just getting loud, Ian.
All good.
For me, I'm in a place with loads and loads of bridges. So every time you talk about regreening the sides of the banks of the rivers and get rid of the canals that are irrigating all the rice fields, you get yes, but then you get a big tree, a big trunk hitting that bridge. What are you going to do then? So it's a very difficult thing to argue against because we put so much infrastructure around our waterways that don't necessarily fit well with the natural behavior they have. But that's one of my most discussed topics whenever I talk to even friends or just random people about this. It's one of the trickiest one for me.
Long into a great session, so I'm going to share everyone's contact details and various accounts and things to follow. Definitely everyone check those out. And do you guys want to leave us with some final thoughts from each of you before we wrap up the session today?
I just want to say that whatever we do, even you, Zach, that you're working all over the world, is extremely important, but it's certainly not enough. So what I think one of the previous speakers said, there's so many people who know that there's huge issues, who know that things are not going well, who are protesting, and it's good to protest, and we are demanding things, and it's good to demand, but we need a lot more people doing things on the field, planting, managing the water, telling people, making them collaborate, building communities. We need more and more and more. We're few, very great work, but this has to really, to become impactful, it has to become common knowledge and common practice. So let's do it.
Oh, yeah. And I think building on that, people believe in what they see, not in what they hear, which is why I think a lot of these really well-intentioned movements don't accomplish much because they're all around talking and not around doing. This provides some doing where people see the results in the first rains, that gathers more people and more excitement. And I totally agree. As much as our Water Stories community is doing incredible things, it's also far too little, far too slow, but it keeps growing more and more each year. And so I hope all of you guys here with us will participate in the community, in the course if you're able to, but there's so many different ways you can engage in this type of work. The course is just a way to fast track it, but you can get involved in these projects. Help all of the speakers here when they have a project in your region. Connect with the other people doing this kind of work in your area, share the content, share these stories, because we really do need a groundswell of people to create this better common future that we're all striving for.